At my partner's company dinner, his coworker sneered and said, "How does it feel being pathetic? Your husband earns, and you just stay home." Everyone laughed softly, including my partner except me. I smiled and asked the CEO, "How does it feel discovering this pathetic woman owns 67% of your company?" The room crashed into silence. His face went gray. This story contains themes of emotional abuse, public humiliation, and intense revenge. Listener discretion is advised. What if the person everyone dismissed as just a housewife actually owned the very company where her husband worked? What if, at the peak of their cruel mockery, she dropped a truth bomb that shattered their entire world? This isn't just a story about revenge. It's about the devastating cost of being invisible and the explosive power of finally being seen. It all started at my husband Richard's company dinner. The Marriott ballroom glittered with the kind of corporate false cheer I'd grown to despise. I was playing my part, as always, the perfect corporate wife. Then Marcus Blackwood, one of Richard's senior colleagues, decided to make me his evening's entertainment. He moved through the room with that obnoxious confidence only a truly entitled man can wield. Well, Karen Winters," he sneered, pulling out the chair beside me without an invitation. "Hiding in the corner as usual." I managed a polite smile. "Just enjoying my wine, Marcus." He just laughed, a grating, arrogant sound. "Richard tells me you keep yourself busy these days. What is it you do exactly? Pilates? Maybe some charity work?" The condescension was thick enough to cut with a knife. This was his favorite game, finding the wives, dissecting their lives for sport. I tried to maintain my composure. "I manage our investments," I said, my voice carefully level. His eyebrows shot up in mock surprise. "Investments? You mean like choosing between mutual funds at the bank?" He snorted. "That's adorable. Very traditional." He looked around, his voice rising, pulling in the attention of nearby tables. "Columbia educated, and you use that Ivy League education for what exactly? Clipping coupons? Planning the grocery budget?" The room began to turn towards us. Conversations died. Marcus, fueled by the attention, stood up, projecting his voice across the entire ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm conducting important research here. I'm trying to understand the modern housewife experience." He gestured towards me with his glass, amber liquid threatening to spill. "Take Karen here. Columbia educated, presumably intelligent, and she's chosen to, what's the phrase? Lean out. Opt out." My face burned, but a strange, cold calm was starting to settle over me. "The question is," he continued, his voice reaching its crescendo, "how does it feel to be a loser?" The word landed in the sudden silence, like a judge's gavel. My breath caught. "I mean seriously," he pressed on, feeding off the nervous laughter that began to bubble up. "Your husband earns millions. He's building an empire. And you just what? Arrange flowers, plan dinner parties, wait for him to come home, and tell you about the real world." The laughter wasn't nervous anymore. It rolled through the ballroom in waves. Genuine, cruel, unanimous. Even James Harrison, the CEO, raised his bourbon in a mock toast. But none of that compared to what happened next. I scanned the crowd, my vision tunneling, searching for Richard's face. He'd defend me. He had to. 22 years of marriage meant something, didn't it? The vows, the life we'd built, the sacrifices I'd made. Surely they counted for something. I found him near the bar, his champagne flute raised, his face lit with genuine amusement. Not the polite, uncomfortable smile of someone trying to navigate an awkward situation. Not the tight expression of a husband watching his wife be humiliated. He was laughing, really laughing. His shoulders shook with it. His eyes crinkled at the corners the way they did when he watched his favorite comedians. He clinked glasses with another executive, both of them finding my humiliation genuinely entertaining. The room tilted. Or maybe I did. The chandelier light suddenly felt too bright. The laughter too loud, echoing off marble and crystal until it seemed to come from everywhere at once. The word loser bounced around the space, defining me, redefining me, erasing 22 years of existence and replacing it with a single, devastating label. I thought about the 2 miscarriages Richard never knew about. The first, I'd bled alone in our bedroom, too afraid to call him and disrupt his Tokyo deal. The second, I'd driven myself to the hospital, held my own hand through the pain while he finalized a Singapore merger. I thought about the nights I'd spent alone, the birthdays he'd missed, the anniversaries canceled. The slow disappearance of the woman I'd been at Columbia dissolved into the role of Richard's supporting cast. Marcus was still talking, his voice distant now, like hearing someone through water. Maybe we should start a reality show. Real Housewives of Failed Ambitions. More laughter. Richard's, the loudest of all. My hands had been shaking, but they stopped. My heart had been racing, but it slowed. Something inside me, something I'd buried under years of appropriate dresses and neutral nail polish, suddenly cracked open. For 22 years I'd been afraid of disrupting Richard's career, afraid of embarrassing him, afraid of being too much, too loud, too visible. But sitting there, surrounded by people who saw me as nothing more than a failed ambition, a cautionary tale, a loser, I realized something. I wasn't afraid anymore. The Greystone Capital documents were in my safe at home. 67% ownership of Nexus Industries. Acquired quietly over 7 years, through shell companies and private equity maneuvers. Richard's entire career. Marcus's job. James Harrison's CEO position. All of it existed at my discretion. They just didn't know it yet, but they were about to. I stood slowly, my movements deliberate and controlled, smoothing my black dress. The laughter was still echoing, but something in my posture made Marcus hesitate mid-chuckle. "You're absolutely right, Marcus," I said, my voice cutting through the noise like a blade through silk. "Calm, dangerous. I am a loser." He grinned wider, thinking I was admitting defeat. Others leaned in, sensing fresh blood. "A loser who owns 67% of your company." The words hung in the air for a heartbeat. Then 2. Then 3. Marcus's glass stopped halfway to his lips. Someone coughed. A fork clattered. I turned to face James Harrison directly, the CEO who'd barely acknowledged my existence for 7 years. His bourbon was frozen in midair, his face shifting from amusement to utter confusion. "James," I asked, my voice ringing clear, "how does it feel to know that the loser housewife you've been laughing at controls Nexus Industries through Greystone Capital?" The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the soft hum of the air conditioning, the distant clatter of dishes, the whisper of Eleanor Harrison's silk dress as she shifted in her seat. Richard's champagne flute slipped from his hand. The crystal shattered against the marble floor with a sound like breaking bones. Champagne spread in a golden puddle. Nobody moved. Nobody moved at all. "That's not," James started, his voice cracking. He cleared his throat. "Greystone Capital is a private equity firm out of Manhattan. We've never met the principals." "No," I agreed, walking closer to his table, my heels clicking with each step. "You haven't. You've met their representative. Every quarter for the past 7 years, you've sent your reports to a post office box in White Plains. You've deposited dividend checks into accounts managed by shell companies. You've accepted board decisions delivered through lawyers who've never revealed their client's identity." I stopped directly in front of him, close enough to see the sweat beading on his upper lip. 7 years ago, my voice carried across the silent ballroom, Nexus was 48 hours from bankruptcy. Brennan Corp's hostile takeover was almost complete. Your stock had dropped 70%. 3 major clients had pulled their contracts. The board was meeting every 6 hours, trying to find a miracle. James's hands were shaking now, bourbon trembling in his glass. Then Greystone Capital appeared, a bailout offer that seemed too good to be true. $40 million in immediate capital, restructuring of all debt, new credit lines. The only cost was majority ownership, 67% to be exact. I pulled my phone from my purse, opened an encrypted file, and set it on James's table. The Greystone Capital letterhead was clearly visible, along with my signature as managing director. My money, my terms, my control. Patricia, Richard's secretary, had her phone out, recording everything. 2 junior executives, near the bar, were frantically texting. Marcus still hadn't moved. "Every major decision for the past 7 years," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "Every executive hire, every bonus package, every strategic pivot, they all required approval from Greystone. From me." I turned to look at Richard, who stood in a puddle of champagne, his face the color of old paper. including your promotion to senior vice president, Richard. The board wanted to go with outside talent, but Greystone insisted on promoting internally. I insisted. I thought you deserved the chance to prove yourself. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. The Singapore merger that made your career. Greystone provided the bridge financing. The Morrison account you're so proud of? I played golf with Morrison myself to seal that deal. You just presented the paperwork I'd already negotiated. Karen, what? How is this? Richard's voice was barely a whisper. His executive confidence shattered. The Greystone deal saved my career. I was promoted because of that merger. I thought it was a Wall Street firm, a consortium of investors. It was one investor, I said. Your wife, the loser who sits at home arranging flowers. James Harrison was fumbling for his phone now, his fingers clumsy with panic. This has to be verified. Legal needs to call them. Call your head counsel, I said calmly. Ask him about the emergency board meeting Tuesday. He received the notice an hour ago. James's face went from red to white as someone answered his call. He turned away, whispering urgently, but we could all hear the response through the phone speaker. Yes, sir. Greystone Capital. They've called an emergency meeting. They have the votes to replace the entire board if they want. Marcus finally found his voice, though it came out strangled. This is impossible. You're just a housewife. You don't even work. I work, I said, turning to face him. I've been working every day for 7 years. Building positions, acquiring shares through secondary markets, managing a portfolio worth $800 million. I just did it from my home office while you thought I was at book club. Eleanor Harrison spoke for the first time, her voice shrill with panic. James, what does this mean? The house in the Hamptons. The yacht. It means, I said, picking up my purse with deliberate calm, that the free ride is over. I looked around the room at the faces that had been laughing at me minutes ago. They weren't laughing now. They looked like passengers who just realized their captain had abandoned ship. Enjoy the rest of your dinner, I said, adjusting my purse strap. Monday morning, there will be a full forensic audit of executive spending. Every corporate card transaction, every expense report, every client entertainment receipt. I started walking toward the exit, my heels marking each step like a countdown. Tuesday, emergency board meeting. We'll be discussing new leadership. Wednesday, Marcus. I paused, turned to look at him over my shoulder. You might want to update your resume. That trip to Vegas last month on the company jet, the one you filed as client entertainment? We have a security footage. The ballroom erupted behind me. Richard calling my name with increasing desperation. James shouting into his phone. Eleanor demanding to know if they'd have to sell the house. Marcus trying to explain about Vegas. But I didn't turn around. I didn't stop walking. 22 years of being invisible had taught me many things. But the most important was this: the best revenge isn't served cold. It's served at exactly the right temperature, at exactly the right moment, to exactly the right people. The valet brought my car. The Tesla Richard didn't know I owned. I drove away from the Marriott, leaving my old life in pieces on the marble floor. Behind me, in that ballroom, the kingdom built on my money was already beginning to crumble. The house was dark when I pulled into the garage at 11:47 p.m. No lights except for the thin yellow line under Richard's study door. He'd beaten me home somehow, probably broke every traffic law in Connecticut. I made myself a cup of expensive oolong, the kind I kept hidden, and climbed the stairs to bed. The rustling of papers and clicking of keyboards from the study followed me all night. At 6 a.m., I found him exactly where I knew he'd be, surrounded by a hurricane of financial documents. 3 laptops open to different shareholder databases. His usually perfect hair stood at angles that defied physics. Empty coffee cups formed a defensive perimeter. His Brooks Brothers shirt was untucked, unbuttoned, and had what looked like mustard stains from a gas station sandwich. We need to talk. His voice was raw, probably from desperate phone calls all night. I poured myself coffee from my private stash, Blue Mountain from Jamaica, $70 a pound, and sat in the leather chair across from him. The chair where I'd sat hundreds of times while he explained why he'd missed another anniversary, another birthday. Is it true? All of it. I took a long sip, savoring the rich flavor. Every word. His hands shook as he pushed a document across the desk, a printout from the SEC database showing Greystone Capital's controlling stake in Nexus Industries. Why didn't you tell me, Karen? We could have been a power couple. We could have run the company together. Think of what we could have accomplished if I'd known. The laugh escaped before I could stop it, sharp and bitter as black coffee. Together, Richard? You told your golf buddies I dabble in investments like it was a cute hobby. You introduced me at last year's Christmas party as someone who used to have career ambitions before she found her true calling as a wife. He flinched, but pressed on. That was just talk. You know how those guys are. I had to maintain an image. An image of what? I challenged. A successful man with a decorative wife? A breadwinner with a dependent? Tell me, Richard, in this fantasy where we run Nexus together, would I still be making your breakfast every morning at 5:30? The doorbell rang at exactly 9 a.m., saving him from answering. Victoria Lawson, my attorney and the only person who knew my secret, stood on my doorstep with 3 associates, all carrying banker's boxes. Good morning, Karen. Ready to change some lives? I led them to my home office. The room Richard thought contained my scrapbooking supplies. His jaw dropped as Victoria's team transformed it into a war room, covering every surface with documents, laptops, and evidence boxes. The forensic audit is complete, Victoria announced, spreading reports across my desk like tarot cards. It's worse than we thought. She pulled up security footage on her laptop. Marcus boarding the company jet with 2 women who were definitely not clients, timestamped for a Wednesday afternoon when he was supposedly in budget meetings. 17 trips to Vegas in the past year, all expenses client entertainment. Total damage, $450,000. The next file showed James Harrison's brother-in-law's consulting firm, $3 million in contracts for services that were never rendered. More documents, more corruption. 7 years of executives treating Nexus like their personal piggy bank, while I remained silent in the shadows. We can destroy them all, Victoria said, her eyes gleaming with legal bloodlust. The question is, how much damage do you want to inflict? I thought about 22 years of being introduced as Richard's better half, as if I wasn't a whole person. 22 years of having my opinions dismissed, my intelligence undermined, my existence reduced to an accessory. All of it, I said, my voice cold and steady. I want them to feel what it's like to lose everything they thought they had. Richard was hovering in the doorway, his face gray as old newspaper. Victoria noticed him and smiled with shark-like precision. Mr. Winters, I'd suggest you retain separate counsel. This is going to get complicated. My phone rang. Melissa's face, her high school graduation photo, where she looked so much like me before I disappeared into Richard's shadow. Mom, Dad just called me crying. He says you've destroyed his career. What's happening? I stepped onto the balcony, away from Richard's desperate eyes. Your father and his colleagues humiliated me at a company dinner. They called me a loser for being a housewife. They laughed at me, Melissa. Your father laughed along. Silence stretched between California and Connecticut. So I told them the truth. That I own the company. That I've owned it all along. Wait, what? You own Dad's company? I explained about Greystone Capital, about saving Nexus from bankruptcy, about hiding my power for 7 years while being treated like furniture. Another long pause. So, you mean you've been running things all along while Dad took credit for being some business genius? Yes. Holy moly, Mom. That's the most badass thing I've ever heard. It's about time you stopped letting him treat you like staff. Remember when he made you skip my recital for his client dinner? When he forgot your birthday 3 years in a row? When he told everyone at Thanksgiving that you'd given up your little career dreams to support him? I'd forgotten she'd been listening all those years, filing away every slight. I'm proud of you, Mom, for finally standing up. After we hung up, Victoria showed me Nexus's internal communication system. An anonymous email had reached every Nexus employee 2 hours ago. Subject line: what your executives don't want you to know. It contained select portions of the audit findings, Marcus's Vegas trips, James's nepotism, the executive team taking million-dollar bonuses while laying off 200 employees last Christmas. Within minutes, the company's Slack channels had exploded, years of resentment pouring out in digital form. Did you send this? I asked Victoria. She shrugged. Whistleblowers are protected by law. Could have been anyone with access to this information. My inbox filled with messages from Nexus employees. The most surprising was from Patricia, Richard's secretary. Mrs. Winters, we always knew you were different. You remembered our names. You asked about our families. You treated us like people, not servants. Thank you for finally holding them accountable. The revolution I'd started had found its own momentum, fueled by years of accumulated injustice. Richard stood in the doorway, watching his world crumble in real time on multiple screens. You planned this, he whispered. You've been planning this for years. No, Richard, I said, meeting his gaze. I've been surviving for years. The planning started last night. When you laughed while they called me a loser. Tuesday morning arrived, gray and drizzling. Perfect weather for a corporate funeral. I dressed carefully in the red Chanel suit I bought years ago but never worn. Richard had called it too aggressive for a woman. Today, aggressive was exactly what I wanted. Victoria and I arrived at Nexus headquarters 15 minutes before the emergency board meeting. The building felt different, quieter, tenser. Mrs. Winters, the security guard at the desk, looked confused. I don't have you on the visitor list. I'm not a visitor, I said, handing him my Greystone Capital business card. I own the building. The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt like ascending to a throne. The boardroom door was solid mahogany, designed to intimidate. I pushed it open without knocking. 12 board members sat around the table like defendants awaiting sentencing. James Harrison was at the head, or what used to be the head before I arrived. His face was haggard, aged 10 years overnight. I walked directly to his chair and stood beside it. That's the chairman's seat, he said weakly. Yes, it is. The silence stretched until he stood, gathering his papers with shaking hands, and moved to a side chair. I sat down in what had always been my rightful place. Greystone Capital is no longer a silent partner, I announced, my voice filling the room. As majority shareholder, I'm exercising my right to direct oversight of this company. James tried to rally. You can't just. I slid a folder across the table. The thud echoed. Embezzlement. Fraud. Breach of fiduciary duty. Your brother-in-law's fake consulting firm. The condo in Miami you bought with company funds. Should I continue? His face crumbled. Effective immediately, your resignation is accepted. Your golden parachute is revoked. Your stock options are void. Security is waiting outside. 30 years, he whispered. I built this company for 30 years. No, James. You inherited a company I saved from bankruptcy and spent 7 years looting it. There's a difference. Security entered. 2 guards who'd probably made minimum wage while James collected million-dollar bonuses. The poetry of it wasn't lost on anyone as they escorted him out. Now, I continued, turning to the remaining board members. Let's discuss new leadership. We should conduct a search, one ventured. Hire a firm, evaluate candidates. No need. Dr. Amelia Foster will serve as CEO, effective immediately. The room erupted in protests. She's just an operations manager. We need someone with CEO experience. The shareholders will revolt. I am the shareholders, I reminded them. And Dr. Foster has been essentially running this company for 5 years while you gentlemen played golf. The door opened and Amelia entered. She wore a simple navy suit but carried herself like she owned the world. Gentlemen, she began, her voice steady and confident. And Mrs. Winters, this restructuring plan will save Nexus $50 million annually while protecting every single non-executive job. She walked them through her vision. Cutting executive perks, not workers. Investing in innovation, not yacht club memberships. Promoting based on merit, not connections. This is what competence looks like, I said when she finished. You've just forgotten because you've been promoting based on golf handicaps instead of ability. That evening, I found Richard in our kitchen, staring at his phone like it held his death warrant. In a way it did. Brennan Corp offered me a position, he said without looking up. Entry-level business development. 53 years old, and they want me to start over as an account coordinator. The same position he'd held at 25. The same position he'd mocked others for still having at 40. They know I'm toxic now. Everyone knows. My own wife didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. They think I'm either an idiot who didn't know his wife owned his company or a fraud who knew and lied about it. The irony was perfect. How does it feel? I asked, pouring myself a glass of wine, the good stuff, no longer hidden. To have your entire professional worth reduced to your relationship with your spouse? To be defined not by your achievements, but by who you married? He looked up at me then, and for the first time in 22 years, I saw understanding in his eyes. But understanding and redemption are different currencies, and his account was overdrawn. Mother stood on my doorstep at 7 a.m. Wednesday, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, wearing the pearls Father gave her for their 30th anniversary. She never visited without calling first. "The whole country club knows," she said, stepping past me into the foyer. Eleanor Harrison was there yesterday, crying into her mimosa about losing their house. Margaret Blackwood has already unfriended me on Facebook, as if Marcus's Vegas trips were somehow my fault. I led her to my office, expecting the lecture about proper behavior, about not making scenes, about maintaining dignity. Instead, she sat down carefully and pulled a worn manila folder from her purse. Her hands trembled slightly. "Do you know what these are?" I looked closer. My Columbia transcripts, showing a 3.9 GPA. The acceptance letter to Harvard Business School that I turned down. The job offer from Goldman Sachs for an analyst position. "You kept these." 23 years, Karen. I've carried these for 23 years, waiting for you to remember who you were before him. She spread the papers across my desk, each one a ghost of the life I'd abandoned. "You were brilliant. Not just smart, brilliant. Professor Hicks called you the most promising student he'd had in a decade. Goldman fought 2 other firms for you. And you gave it all up for a man who introduced you as his better half, like you were just a fraction of a person." Tears were running down her cheeks now. "When your father died and left that insurance money, $2 million, I thought you'd use it to go back to school, to start your own firm, to become the woman he'd raised you to be. Instead, I used it to save Richard's company," I finished, my voice thick with emotion. "Without taking credit, without even telling him it was my money. I let him think it was venture capital. Let him present himself as the business genius who saved a startup." She grabbed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "But I'm proud of you now, Karen, for finally fighting back. Your father would be too." Thursday evening, Richard knocked on my office door, the first time he'd ever done that. He was holding a manila envelope, wearing the gray suit I'd bought him for our 20th anniversary. It hung loose on him now. He'd lost weight. "Can we talk?" I gestured to the chair, but he remained standing, shifting from foot to foot like a schoolboy. "I've had divorce papers drawn up," he said, placing the envelope on my desk. "I'm not contesting anything. You can have it all. The house, the cars, our entire joint portfolio." "How generous of you," I said, a bitter taste in my mouth, "to give me things I paid for." He flinched. I need something, Karen. Some dignity. Maybe a consultant position at Nexus. A reference letter saying I left for personal reasons. Something that doesn't make me look like a complete failure. I studied this man I'd once loved. His shoulders, once broad with confidence, now curved inward. His hands, which used to gesture grandly, hung limp. "You want dignity?" I asked. "Where was my dignity when you laughed as Marcus called me a loser? Where was it when you told people I dabbled in investments? When you introduced me as someone who used to have career ambitions?" "That was different," he whispered. "You're right," I said. "It was different. You had 22 years to give me dignity, Richard. Every single day you chose not to. You chose to treat me like an employee, a secretary, a maid with a marriage certificate. Why should I show you mercy you never showed me?" He stared at the floor, his reflection visible in the polished hardwood. "Because you're better than me," he said quietly. "You always were. I just never wanted to admit it." Before I could respond, we heard a car door slam outside. Melissa's voice carried through the window. She burst through the front door, calling out, "Mom, Dad, we need to talk." She found us in my office, took one look at our faces, and her smile faded. "You're getting divorced, aren't you?" Neither of us answered, which was answer enough. She pulled out her phone, swiping to a photo. It was her 5th birthday party. Richard and I, flanking her, she blew out candles on a Barbie cake I'd made from scratch. We were laughing. All 3 of us, genuinely happy in that frozen moment. This was before Dad made senior VP. Before Mom's investments. Before any of the garbage that you think matters. We were happy with less. Melissa, Richard started. No, Dad. You don't get to talk. You laughed while Mom was being humiliated. And Mom, you've made your point. You've destroyed Dad professionally. Marcus is apparently working at a used car dealership. James Harrison is under federal investigation. What more do you want? She looked between us, her eyes, my eyes, blazing with frustration. I don't want to lose my family to revenge. Can't we salvage something? I looked at the photo again. That woman in the picture. She'd already given up Harvard to support Richard's dream. She'd already spent her father's inheritance saving his company. The happiness in that photo was built on a foundation of my sacrifices. Sacrifices nobody else even knew about. That family never really existed, sweetheart, I said gently. It was just me pretending everything was fine while slowly disappearing. Later, at 2 a.m., I wandered through our house like a ghost, haunting my own life. The formal dining room where I'd hosted countless dinner parties for Richard's colleagues. The living room where I'd smiled through book club meetings. I ended up in Richard's study, his former study, I suppose. In the bottom drawer of his desk, I found it. The business plan for his first startup. My handwriting filled the margins. My financial projections. My market analysis. My strategies. The cover page read, Innovations. A business proposal by Richard Winters. Not by Karen and Richard Winters. Not with contributions from Karen Winters. Just Richard taking credit for my mind while I took credit for keeping his house. I poured a glass of his 30-year-old Macallan, the bottle he'd been saving for a special occasion, and raised it to the empty room, to the invisible woman who'd finally been seen. The whiskey burned, but not as much as the truth. I'd won everything and lost everything simultaneously. The victory tasted like ashes. Expensive ashes, but ashes nonetheless. My phone buzzed at 3 a.m. Victoria's name lit up the screen. Did I wake you? She asked, though we both knew I hadn't slept properly in days. What is it? The board wants to move the emergency shareholder meeting to Friday, she said. Same venue as last week's dinner, the Marriott Grand Ballroom. They think familiar territory will give them an advantage. I almost laughed. They wanted to return to the scene of my humiliation, not realizing they were handing me the perfect stage for their destruction. Tell them yes. And Victoria, make sure the media knows. I want cameras. Friday arrived wrapped in sunshine that felt like cosmic irony. I chose my outfit carefully, a white Armani suit I bought years ago but never had the courage to wear. Richard had called it too bold, which made it perfect for today. The Marriott's grand ballroom had been transformed. Gone were the round dinner tables where executives had laughed at me. Instead, 300 chairs faced a raised platform. A projection screen behind the podium, large enough that no one could miss what I was about to show them. The crowd was a mix of shareholders, employees, and media. CNN had sent a crew. The Wall Street Journal had 3 reporters. I stood backstage watching Richard enter. He chose a seat in the very back row, probably hoping to slip out unnoticed. He had no idea how difficult things were about to get. At exactly 10 a.m., I walked onto that stage, my heels clicking the same rhythm that had marked my exit a week ago. The murmuring crowd fell silent. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my voice carrying to every corner of the room. My name is Karen Winters, and through Greystone Capital, I am the majority shareholder of Nexus Industries. The presentation clicked to life behind me. A simple slide, showing Greystone's 67% ownership stake. For 7 years, I've been silent while executives treated this company like their personal piggy bank. Silent while they destroyed the culture. Silent while they built a boys' club on the foundation of my investment. Marcus's Vegas trips appeared on screen. Receipts, photos, security footage. Marcus Blackwood, who last week called me a loser housewife, spent $450,000 of company money on personal entertainment. James's fraudulent contracts filled the screen. James Harrison funneled $3 million to his brother-in-law's fake consulting firm. Executive bonuses versus employee layoffs. A graph that looked like a crime scene. While laying off 200 workers last Christmas, executives gave themselves 7-figure bonuses. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Employees in the audience were recording on their phones. Good. I wanted this viral by noon. Effective immediately. I continued. Nexus Industries will be restructured from the ground up. New leadership, new culture, new values. A hand shot up in the press section. Wall Street Journal. Mrs. Winters, what about your husband's role in the scandal? I found Richard in the back row. Our eyes met across 300 people. 22 years of marriage compressed into a single moment. Richard Winters has submitted his resignation. I said, never breaking eye contact with him. An investigation found he knowingly benefited from executive corruption while claiming ignorance. Richard started to stand, to leave, but I wasn't finished. Mr. Winters will receive no severance package, no references, no golden parachute. The man who built his career on his wife's money, his wife's connections, and his wife's strategies, while calling her a trophy, is no longer associated with Nexus Industries in any capacity. He stood frozen as phones swiveled toward him, everyone suddenly recognizing the former senior VP slinking toward the exit. The business community should know exactly what kind of man they're dealing with, I added. Someone who laughs when his wife is called a loser, then discovers she owns his entire world. Richard finally made it to the door, but not before 50 phones captured his retreat. The video would be viral within minutes. The executive, who didn't know his wife owned his company. But today isn't about destruction, I continued, turning back to the audience. It's about construction. Nexus will donate $10 million to establish the Phoenix Foundation. The screen behind me shifted to show the foundation's mission statement. This foundation will provide scholarships and mentorship for women whose careers were derailed. Women who were told they were just housewives while holding their families together. Female executives passed over for promotion because they didn't golf with the boys. Every brilliant mind dismissed because it came in a dress. This is for you. The applause started slowly, led by the female employees, but it grew until the entire room was clapping. I noticed Eleanor Harrison in the third row, tears streaming down her carefully made-up face. She'd been James's wife for 35 years, invisible at every company function, introduced as James's better half, just like I'd been Richard's. After the meeting, Eleanor approached me, her voice barely a whisper. I have a degree from Yale, she said. I was going to be a doctor, but James needed support for his career, and I disappeared. You don't have to be invisible anymore, I told her. None of us do. 6 months passed in a blur of corporate restructuring and personal reconstruction. October arrived, and I found myself standing in the transformed headquarters of Nexus Industries. Amelia met me at reception, her CEO confidence radiating. 40% profit increase, she said, leading me through halls that hummed with a different energy. And we did it while implementing 6 months of paid family leave. The executive floor had been gutted and rebuilt. Gone were the dark wood panels and portraits of white-haired men. The walls now showcase the company's actual builders, the engineer from Mumbai who revolutionized their supply chain, the single mother from Detroit who designed their best-selling product, the former refugee from Syria who transformed their customer service. James's old office? I asked. Nursing room for new mothers, Amelia smiled. We have 14 employees, using it regularly. His mahogany desk makes an excellent changing table. The old executive dining room had been converted into an open cafeteria where everyone ate together. No more segregation by salary level. You did this, Amelia said, handing me a folder thick with letters. These are from employees. They wanted to thank you for saving their jobs, for changing the culture, for giving them hope. I opened one at random. Mrs. Winters, I've worked here for 15 years. For the first time, I feel valued. My ideas matter. My voice is heard. Thank you for burning down the old boys club so we could build something better. I just lit the match, I said. You built this. Spring brought Melissa's graduation from Stanford. I arrived early, claiming a seat in the third row. Then I saw him. Richard stood by the entrance, scanning the crowd uncertainly. He was thinner, his suit off the rack. His hair had gone completely gray. When our eyes met, he froze. He looked like he might turn and leave, but then started walking toward me. Hello, Karen. His voice was different, quieter, almost humble. Richard. He gestured to the empty seat beside me. It's a free country. We sat in silence for a moment. I've been in therapy twice a week for 6 months, he said, staring at his hands. No wedding ring. No Rolex. I understand now what I took from you. What I stole. Not just your money or your ideas, but your identity, your dreams. 22 years of your life. The apology sounded genuine, but I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no residual love. Just emptiness. I'm glad you're learning, I said. Then turned my attention back to the stage. After the ceremony, Melissa found us. Dad's working at a startup in Palo Alto, she told me later after Richard had shuffled away. Junior consultant. Makes about what a recent college grad would. He lives in a studio apartment near the train station, takes public transit. His coworkers don't know his history, and he's terrified they'll find out. The man who'd laughed while I was called a loser now knew exactly how it felt to be one. July brought the Phoenix Foundation's first gala. The ballroom at the Ritz, not the Marriott, never again the Marriott, filled with 25 women whose lives had been transformed. Story after story of resurrection. Women who'd been buried under other people's ambitions, finally digging their way back to the surface. You gave us permission to exist again, Sarah told me. To be more than someone's wife or mother. To remember we had dreams before we had families. Their success was my real revenge. Not destroying Richard, but building something from the ashes of my own sacrificed dreams. August found me alone in my Westchester mansion at 2 a.m., unable to sleep. The house felt too big, too empty, too quiet. Richard had taken nothing in the divorce. Melissa was starting her own journey at a tech firm in Seattle. I walked through rooms that echoed with absence. The friends who'd filled this house had been Richard's friends. The social life I'd maintained had been built around his career. Without him, without the role of corporate wife, I was untethered. Floating in space I'd claimed but didn't know how to inhabit. My phone sat silent. No one called anymore except Victoria about legal matters, and Melissa to check if I was eating. The women I dismissed for 2 decades now feared me. The executives who'd laughed at me now avoided me. I'd won every battle, but lost the war for human connection. Still, as dawn broke over Westchester, painting my empty mansion in shades of gold and possibility, I thought about that night at the Marriott. Marcus calling me a loser. Richard's laughter mixing with champagne bubbles and chandelier light. The moment I decided to stop being invisible. The price of visibility was isolation. The cost of revenge was loneliness. But as I raised my glass to the sunrise, toasting another day of freedom, I knew the truth. I'd do it all again, because being feared and alone was still better than being loved and invisible. This was my story. It's a messy, complicated truth, and it cost me more than I ever imagined. But I had to tell it. What do you think? Was the price of my victory worth the isolation? Have you ever felt so invisible you wanted to burn your old life down? I really want to know your thoughts on this. Let me know in the comments below.